and welcome back to Tabletop Thoughts. Today we are going to be continuing our look at Unnatural selection, and we are going to be looking at the magic section. Alright, so performing magic. Grave Warden magic is unnatural, Mercury, and dangerous. And the Shaman magic is traditional, ritualistic, and hypnotic. Ovate magic is verdant, earthly, and wild. So the first thing they talk about is the drumming and chanting. Those are both part of the shaman. And then failure, your chant ends. Raising the dead, critical failures if you're a grave warden. The shaman and the ovate are more like a priest class, so if you fail your checks, you have to perform some kind of ritual or a purging. And then the grave warding's more like a wizard, where if you fail, they have tables for you to mishap tables, depending on the level of, the tier of the spell. Some of these are kind of nice. But I think the best thing about this whole section is right here. These new classes actually get their own spells, which is kind of nice. Some of the other supplements I've seen, they'll come up with new classes, but no new spells. That is something that I really liked about the official classes that were added in for the Arcane Library when they did their Shadowdark. That they, like when they made the witch, they had, it wasn't a whole lot of spells. I think there was like 5 or 6 for each tier, but they were unique spells. So you see here 4 tiers of Grave Warden spells, where they have Statch, protection from undead. So a lot of theirs is touching on what you'd consider necromancy. So if you were not going to use the Grave Warden class, this would be something that I would allow wizards to add into their list if they were going to, say, study necromancy. So if somebody was like, hey, I want to be a wizard, but I want to be a necromancer, I would push them towards these spells. The Ovate, this is more like the Druid. A lot of spells are just like so. If you didn't want to use the Ovate as written, I would make the cleric, say priest, if they wanted to be a nature priest, be a woodsy and stuff like that, I would give them access to this and then have them work with you and make some kind of neutral alignment, like nature kind of deity that they would be a follower of. Because nature, I would consider neutral, because there is death, there, fighting, it's chaotic at times, it's lawful at times, it's right in the middle. It's just the way nature is. But you see like charming animals, bites, whips of fire ants. So, and then the shaman chant. So if you were going to have some kind of say maybe like Northern Men or something like that, where they could have a shaman. If you think of like Outlanders or something like that, this is where I would see a shaman being more than a druid or cleric, because for some reason that priests and clerics and that kind of hint to a organized religion. Maybe I'm just reading more into it, but it seems like if you're going to have followers and you pray to a god and they give you a spell, it's more like a hierarchy, whereas shaman seems like it's more like going to maybe your ancestors or nature as another way, like maybe the animals, stuff like that. So I would like Mother Nature type, instead of having like a god of nature, it's almost like nature as almost like a deity as itself. I would allow shaman for like a less civilized. So if you wanted to add them in, I wouldn't discount it. I would just make sure that they understood that, you're going to be more of an Outlander type character. But And then they go through all the different classes, and it's nice that they give the ranks, what class it is, range. They have a little description for it. Very well done. There is artwork for some of them, as you can see down here. So this is the part. This section by itself is worth the cost of the book, just because it gives more spells. That's something that is always something I like you could add. Whereas if you're, instead of building all new classes, just take what's there and kind of not change it, but use it. You can just manipulate the class. If you want to add necromancers, okay, it's a wizard. Here's some death spells. Drop that into your game. You want to be a nature, like a druid, where you go out and pray to nature gods. Well, you could take the ovate and stick that in there, or just go, okay, you're a priest. You still have the same talents in that. Maybe steal a talent from this class, steal the spells, but you get to understand that, this is where I see Shadowdark getting, like, it's open enough that it allows you to add stuff like that, where you don't always have to add new classes. I know everybody always wants a new class, but I forget which YouTuber was it, but when they were talking about, okay, when you played first edition, everybody just like, okay, I get on a horse and I ride, and everybody just assumed you could ride a horse because there wasn't a skill called riding. Once you add that in, it kind of takes away, like, okay, if you don't have the riding skill, can you still ride? Can you perform? It was like, as you expand, it almost limits you somewhat, because if you drop another class and you're like, okay, well, if you want to be a wizard and be a necromancer, well, we have this necromancer class, instead of just allowing it to grow naturally in your campaign and in your group. If you start dropping classes, it seems like it actually limits you instead of making it, because if there's a class that does that, then you're like, well, I want to be a paladin. Maybe yours is more like a fighter, it's holy, or maybe you wanted to be more like a priest, but you wanted to use a sword or something like that. And instead of, going, okay, well, let's take a priest. If you pray to, a deity that's a war type deity, or yeah, you could use a sword because he's a war type deity. Now, if you make a paladin class, well, then you're like, well, I want to be, you have to be a paladin. You can't be it kind of limits. But yeah, this is very nice. And you can see there is quite a few spells for everything. Gameplay. This is where we come up to optional roles that, like ceremonies, that could be used to replace the carousing. So if in this, I would allow more for even druids, or if you had religious folk, where you could do ceremonies instead of, if you're a holy person and you're lawful and stuff like that, carousing and drinking or caravanning around doesn't really fit the, if you're a paladin type character, where ceremonies would be like, you cleanse, you purge, you ask for forgiveness. This is the kind of stuff that you could use instead of just, hey, drop 150 gold pieces in a charity pot somewhere, and your god's like, oh, you're good. Something like this, where you have to perform something and it takes time. Because time is always a nice thing to have a way of spending. That way, it's not like, I don't know if you've ever played 5e, but if you don't really follow time and have downtime and all this stuff, you realize that you go from like level 1 to like level 7, 8. You could do it in like 4 or 5 months. And if really that easy to do, why isn't like everybody walk around like level 4 or 5? If it's, you go out and you just kill a few things, you're leveling up, you think that there'll be a lot more heroes like that around. So adding time in between, like you have to spend a week doing this, you have to spend time doing that. That also helps if your campaign has a calendar, which is something I talked about on my website before. I generated my own calendar, but you could put holidays. You could put special festival times. You could break up the seasons. But if you have a marching calendar, you can use that with your campaign to track progress. If you give your factions something to do, you have a cult that's trying to raise a demon, you can mark on the calendar, okay, the campaign's starting on this day. In 3 months, these guys are going to have collected what they need. And in another 3 months, they will, finish the ritual. You can just fill it in on your calendar, keep it on your notes. If the heroes encounter them and they are able to slow that down, maybe the cult needs 5 objects. Well, if the heroes go and get one of those objects, that's going to stop the ritual completely, but now maybe the cult follows the group. Or if the cult needs to sacrifice somebody on a special day of the year and your heroes stop that, does it stop the faction, or did you just postpone it for a year till the next time, the next year comes around, they go get another victim? So you could push their goals back, or if you push it back far enough, you could buy yourself time to go handle another crisis and then come back and be like, okay, well, we're going to have to finally finish them, but we bought ourselves a year. Curiosities. These are random tables that let you, hey, there's a plant, flower, bushes, just so if you need what it's made of, some kind of characteristics. These are nice if you find, it's not always like, hey, you find a gold cup. You could roll on here and be like, hey, you got an object. It's a musical instrument that is made out of sapphire, and characteristics say an oddity that it actually plays songs backwards when you play them. Just unique little things like that. Instead of always having, okay, you find a gold cup, you find a crown, stuff like that, you can use it to create, extra items and stuff like that. That, random tables is really what this game is built upon. And that brings us up to monsters. We will look at that in our next video just to see what kind of monsters, are in this new supplement. But thanks again, and as always, keep on gaming. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this, check out the next video right here. It's packed with more great content. And as always, keep on gaming.